When Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett calmly questioned Melania Trump's visa history, it wasn't just a mic drop moment. It was a mirror held steady in front of America's most comfortable hypocrisies. It didn't shout, but it stopped everything. Like even the air paused to listen. The Capitol Hill hearing had been a circus raised voices, tossed accusations, cameras capturing every second. And yet there she sat, Jasmine Crockett, poised, flipping through papers like the chaos around. Her didn't matter, but it did. You could see it in the way her hand paused mid-page, and how her eyes narrowed slightly at the panelist across from her. "You question my loyalty to this country?" she said, eyes forward, voice steady. "If we're going there, should we talk about Melania's visa history too?" The room didn't just go silent, it froze. The Republican panelists, who'd been lobbing thinly veiled barbs about real Americans, suddenly looked like someone had yanked the battery out of his brain. Even some Democrats blinked. Did she really say that? She did, and she didn't. Flinch. No smirk. No celebration. Just clear, deliberate calm. Like she'd been saving that one sentence for exactly the right time. And when it hit harder than any fiery speech or talking point. 10 seconds of a 2-hour hearing. Clipped and posted online was all it took. Twitter ignited. Hashtags like hashtag Jasmine said it and hashtag MELANIA green card exploded across timelines. But here's what most missed. She wasn't calling for deportation. She wasn't tearing anyone down. She was exposing the gap between how America treats some immigrants and others. Because for years, immigrant families, especially black and brown ones, have been interrogated, scrutinized, and made to prove their patriotism to people. Waving flags and asking, "Do you even love this country?" Crockett turned the question around. It was never just about Melania. It was about the hypocrisy, the double standards. The way some people are always seen as outsiders, no matter how long they've been here. Of course, the backlash came fast. Conservative outlets screamed Democrat attacks Melania's immigration status, and did Crockett just call for deporting a first lady? But the real clip told a different story. And that story landed like a gut punch. By morning, 3 interview requests were on her desk, including one from a major morning show. Her team, running on fumes, debated strategy. "Do we say anything?" an aide asked. Crockett didn't hesitate. "We say everything," she replied. "Just not the way they want us to." Because while pundits were busy dissecting her words, something deeper was rising, something years in the making. Long before the cameras ever zoomed in on her face, Jasmine Crockett had already made peace with being misunderstood. She knew the cost of speaking plainly in rooms designed for performative civility. She understood that a black woman in power who refused to soften her voice or shrink her truth would always be called angry, radical, or worse, ungrateful. But she wasn't new to this. Before Congress, she stood in Dallas courtrooms as a public defender. No cameras, no applause. Just people mothers fighting for custody. Teens stopped for reasons that made no sense. Young men judged not by their actions, but by their skin or their zip code. She remembered one case clearly. A quiet 19-year-old arrested for possession after a traffic stop that never should have happened. No record, nothing violent. But the system wouldn't let go. In court, Crockett stood up and said, "You're building a cage around this, boys. Future for something you wouldn't even book your own nephew for." She didn't win the case, but she changed the outcome. Probation instead of prison. In that fire, she carried it with her into the Texas House and all the way to Capitol Hill. But DC is a different game. Here, playing smart means staying quiet, smiling while they cut you off. Crockett never played dumb. She wasn't about to start, so when that smug prosecutor from Florida started throwing phrases like American values and foundational loyalty, she wasn't reacting with emotion. She was recognizing a script. One she'd heard her whole life. It always went like this. First, they question your background, then your motives, then your love for your country. And when you finally clap back, clear unshaken, they pretend to be shocked. And that shock, it's not just performative, it's dangerous. That's why her line, "Should we talk about Melania's visa history too?" wasn't random. It came from years of watching how whiteness, wealth, and the right last name could scrub your record clean. Melania Trump's own immigration story had always raised quiet questions modeling visas. Work permits, unclear timelines, but it never mattered. She'd married the right man, had the right accent, wore the right heels. And Jasmine Crockett, she had the truth, and the nerve to say it out loud. She had the nerve to say it not as gossip, not as a cheap shot, but as a clear, undeniable comparison. And that's exactly why it hit so hard. For some, too hard. The backlash came fast, not because she was wrong, but because she was right in a way they couldn't deflect. The headlines twisted her words before the sentence even finished echoing through the hearing room. But Jasmine Crockett didn't blink. She wasn't riffing or reaching. She was standing on years of lived reality. Years where people like her were asked to prove where they came from, explain their accents, show their papers just to exist in peace. That hearing wasn't her going rogue, it was her refusing to let another lie about loyalty pass unchecked. But outside the walls of that hearing room, another storm was forming. It had Trump's fingerprints all over it. By sunset, Jasmine Crockett's name was everywhere. Donald Trump noticed. The first post dropped on Truth Social just before 10 p.m. All caps. Rage distilled into keystrokes. Disgusting attack on Melania. Jasmine Crockett should be ashamed. She should apologize. To the First Lady immediately, then another. These people hate America. They hate success. They hate beauty. Melania came here legally. Crockett is a nobody looking for ratings, and just like that, fire was lit. His followers, many already angry, already looking for someone to blame, latched on. They didn't watch the clip. They didn't care what she'd actually said. The headline was enough. Within hours, Jasmine's name was trending alongside words like traitor, racist, and un-American. Cable news followed the scent. By midnight, her face was plastered across 3 networks, each offering their own spin. Some played the clip, others only showed a screenshot, quoting her line out of context, making it sound like she'd stormed into the East Wing and demanded Melania's deportation. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing calls, texts, mentions, hate messages, death threats, scattered among them, a few voices asking, "Are you okay?" But Crockett wasn't shaken. She knew the playbook. Trump wasn't defending Melania's record. He wasn't correcting her. He was doing what he always did, spinning outrage into noise, baiting the public with volume, hoping no one looked deeper. Her chief of staff, Lane Robbins, was still at his desk when the posts hit. "Here we go," he muttered, watching the storm roll in. Jasmine walked in, mug of chamomile in hand, calm as ever. "Melania's trending under Einstein visa," she said, raising an eyebrow. "I didn't even start that one." Lane cracked half a smile. "They're gonna drag you hard for this. They've been trying," she said, sinking into her chair. "Now they just have better lighting." That night, she didn't post, didn't clap back. No quotes, no comebacks. Instead, her team uploaded the full, uncut footage of the hearing to her official YouTube channel. No commentary, no edits. Just the words, her tone, her receipts, the truth. Within an hour, it had over 800,000 views. People weren't just watching, they were studying. Sharing it with captions like "Watch the whole thing, she didn't lie," and "Funny how they dish it but can't take it." Meanwhile, Trump kept posting like clockwork. Each message louder, more frantic. Some didn't even mention her by name anymore. Just broad shots about radical leftists, race baiters, and America haters. But something was different this time. This time people started asking questions, uncomfortable ones. Why? Is a black congresswoman being called racist for stating a fact? Why doesn't anyone ever talk about Melania's visa record? And the hardest one, why do the rules only seem to apply to some of us? Even a few conservative commentators, those who still pretended to care about facts, reluctantly admitted Crockett hadn't lied. She hadn't insulted Melania. She had just asked a question. And that scared people more than any insult ever could. But while the internet was busy throwing punches, something else was shifting. Something that didn't make headlines but would matter more. By sunrise, Crockett's clip had crossed state lines, not just in views, but in tone. Local stations in places like Fresno, Tulsa, and Dayton began airing the full footage. No spin, just the moment. The question, the silence that followed. And for the first time in a long time, America wasn't just watching, it was listening. Asterisk. The question was simple. Was she wrong? That was the real issue for her critics. She hadn't lied. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't hurl insults. She asked calmly, directly, with a tone so precise it couldn't be twisted. Now, millions were watching the clip, drawing their own conclusions. By 9 a.m., she was booked for 2 national interviews, NBC and CBS mornings. She chose CBS first. Her team gathered in a small studio just off Connecticut Avenue. Hair, makeup, microphones, while they prepped. Lane scrolled headlines out. Loud, Crockett swipe at Melania stirs national debate. That one's fair, she said. Then came, is this what decency looks like now? And Lane's personal favorite, Congresswoman weaponizes immigration history in political ambush. Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Bush. I asked a question the same kind they ask people who look like me every damn day. And the cameras rolled. CBS anchor Elaine Truda didn't waste time. Congresswoman, you've been accused of attacking the former First Lady. Do you think your remarks went too far? Jasmine didn't flinch. She leaned in, eyes clear. I think it's fascinating how a question about fairness becomes an attack. What I said wasn't wild. What's wild is that people are more upset about me saying it than the double standards it exposed. Trute tilted her head. So, you're saying this wasn't personal? I don't know, Melania. I don't wish her harm. But if we're going to keep pretending this country treats everyone the same, then we need to tell the truth. Some folks stumble through the process and get praised. Others make one mistake and end up in deportation court. That 40-second clip was reposted over 4 million times. Meanwhile, the usual cable suspects were fuming. One anchor on Patriot Channel News called her a bitter woman with a vendetta. Another claimed she hated traditional American families. But it wasn't landing. People watched the way she spoke, how she carried herself, and came to an uncomfortable conclusion. She wasn't wrong. On Twitter, a wave rose. Young immigrants began sharing their stories under the hashtag #IamJasmine. Stories of proving again and again they belonged. Of being pulled from lines, held longer, questioned harder. One user wrote, my mom was almost deported over a typo. But Melania got a modeling visa renewed how many times? Jasmine had said. What many had felt for years, still, the backlash came hard. Her office email had to be locked down. Thousands of hate messages. Some were just angry. Others were threats. One read, keep your mouth shut or we'll do it for her. Lane flagged that one for the FBI, but Crockett didn't back down. That afternoon, she spoke with a college reporter from Ann Arbor. Did you ever consider apologizing? She tilted her head. Apologize for what? Telling the truth? It's asking the same kind of question that gets asked of people like me all the time? No, that's not something I regret. It's something I wish more people had the guts to do. That's what made her dangerous. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't disappear. She showed up. She spoke clearly. And she refused to play small. She wasn't trying to win the argument. She was shifting the conversation. But even as she held firm in the spotlight, something else was brewing off camera. It's away from headlines. The first spark came from Mesa, Arizona. A protest had already been planned outside the federal courthouse meant to spotlight quietly rising deportation cases. But once the Crockett clip went viral, everything changed. Organizers rewrote their signs. Her name was everywhere. One woman, Ana Ruiz, 27, born in Flagstaff to Mexican parents, stood on the courthouse steps, holding a cardboard sign that read, "If she gets to stay, so should my dad." It was blunt, personal, in an aura. The crowd grew. Not massive like the coastal city marches, but loud, visible, and raw. Over 500 people showed up: teachers, veterans, nurses, students, some carrying homemade signs, others holding family photos, and just like that, What started as a moment in a hearing room had become something bigger. A movement that no one either side could afford to ignore. Stuck in green card limbo, the chant broke through the noise. Same rules, same rights. No more silence. The mess of protests made the evening news not for chaos because there wasn't any but for clarity. Gotta moment to real lives. Suddenly, this wasn't just politics. It was personal. It was about families. It's about fairness. About the two sets of rules everyone knew existed, but no one dared say out loud, even in places you'd never expect. Shreveport, Louisiana, Lincoln, Nebraska. Small town halls buzzed with conversation. High school debate teams dissected her. Clip in real time. Civics teachers pressed pause mid-lesson to say, "Let's talk about this. Why does this make people so uncomfortable?" Meanwhile, conservative media tried to drown it out. One syndicated host scoffed, "This is what happens. When people who hate America get elected, they tear down good women like Melania to push their bitter, divisive garbage." But this time, the noise wasn't working like it used to. Even some moderate Trump supporters were whispering, "Well, she didn't lie technically, and it was a fair question." Then, like someone pulling the fire alarm, another video surfaced. Reddit lit up with a clip from 2001, an old Slovenian interview where Melania vaguely implied she may have worked in the US before her paperwork was finalized. Nothing definitive, but it was enough. Enough to shake the foundation of something no one had looked at too closely. Now, the conversation shifted. Not did Crockett go too far, but wait, what are the facts here? Fact-checkers mobilized. Immigration lawyers weighed in. Old investigative pieces were resurrected, stories no one cared about when she was posing for magazine covers. Crockett's question didn't seem outrageous anymore. It seemed overdue. In Phoenix, a woman named Darnesha Fuller sat at her dining table scrolling headlines on her tablet. She turned to her husband. "She's not saying Melania should be deported. She's saying if they treat us like suspects, we get to ask questions too." He nodded slowly. "People don't like mirrors," he said, "especially when they don't recognize what's looking back." Meanwhile, Jasmine Crockett wasn't chasing headlines. She was drafting legislation. Not flashy, not camera bait. A quiet amendment that would require full transparency for high-profile immigration applicants. No more sealed records. No more loopholes for the wealthy or well-connected. She didn't announce it. Not yet. She was waiting, not out of fear, but because she understood timing. But just as she prepared for the next chapter, something from the past was about to resurface. And it brought more than memories. The threats had grown darker. Her team stopped opening. Physical mail, unless it came through official channels. Too many handwritten letters carried hate. One envelope contained torn flags. Another single bullet casing taped inside. That one the FBI flagged and began watching the office quietly. Jasmine didn't change her rhythm. "They want you scared," she told Lane one night, standing by the window, watching DC's lights flicker. "They want to see you shrink." She wasn't broken. She wasn't defeated. But she was tired. That night, near midnight, she left the office alone. No aides, no calls, just silence. Her apartment in Tacoma Park didn't look like a politician's home.
Ow.
No press clippings. No framed invites. Just soft light, a well-worn couch, a faded photo on the fridge, her and her mother on law school graduation day, held up by a cracked magnet. She kicked off her shoes, reheated leftover curry, sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, scrolling. Through messages, she skipped the vitriol, paused at the real ones. Then one voicemail stood out. Her mother's voice. "Hey baby, I know you're busy. Just remember what I told you. They don't get to define you. It's not ever. Not even when it's loud." She played it twice. Then called back. Her mother picked up on the first ring. No delay. Like she'd been waiting. "Hey mama." "Hey baby. You okay? I'm holding." "That's not what I asked." Jasmine didn't answer right away. Her voice caught. "They're trying to flip this. Say I hate the country. Say I'm attacking women." Her mother didn't yell, didn't scold. She just let the silence sit. Then finally said, "Truth doesn't always come out clean. Sometimes it comes out bruised, but it still comes out." That line hit hard. They talked for another 20 minutes. Church updates, her uncle's arthritis. It's the neighbor who still couldn't work their new leaf blower. And for the first time in days, Jasmine laughed. A real laugh. That sound carried her into the next morning. The pressure was still there. The calls didn't stop. But one stood out from a name she hadn't seen in years. Eli Kwan, a former immigration attorney who once ran a legal clinic with her in Oak Park. They hadn't spoken since she left for Congress. No subject line. Just a calendar slot. Private, he showed up with a manila envelope and eyes shadowed by 2 sleepless nights. "Are we secure?" he asked as he sat across from her. Lane shut the office door. Eli slid the folder across the desk. "This isn't public yet, but it will be. And when it is, it's going to flip everything." Inside, scans of old immigration documents. Melania Trump's early visa applications, letters, notes, filing history. One document stood out. Request for reconsideration that casually referenced freelance work done before official authorization. Jasmine read it twice, then leaned back. "You verified this? 3 times? Quietly? I've been sitting on it for weeks. But now it matters." Lane stared at the folder like it might start ticking. "Why bring it to me?" Eli exhaled. "Because you didn't lie. You're the only one saying the quiet part out loud." Jasmine closed the folder gently. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't rise. "Okay," she said. "Let's get ready." But while they prepared to drop something that could shift the conversation entirely, someone else was already listening. And they weren't pundits or politicians. They were people. Ordinary people who'd had enough of the noise, who saw something in Jasmine Crockett's question that felt honest, familiar. Theirs. The first voice came from El Paso. A young teacher, Marisol Jimenez, posted a video on Instagram. No edits. No music. Just her in front of a whiteboard still covered in lesson notes. "I'm not here to talk about parties, but I've had to explain to my 3rd graders why their parents have to carry certain papers everywhere. Those same kids saw grown-ups get angry because someone questioned how a white European woman came here. Think about that."
Oh.
The clip blew up over 3 million views in a weekend. Comments flooded in. Teachers, students, parents, saying the same thing. The rules don't apply equally. And when someone finally says it, they get painted as the problem. In Minneapolis, an Army veteran named Andre Colvin posted a video from his backyard. Birds chirped. He sat on a lawn chair with iced tea in hand. "I served this country. Twice. And I still get asked where I'm really from. I don't know this Congresswoman. She asked a question I've been biting my tongue on for years. If that makes her un-American, what does that make me?" Then came the youth. In Sacramento, college students staged a silent sit-in. Not loud, not angry, just still. Each held a sign with only a question. Who gets to belong? Why do papers matter more for some? What if she was right? Photos hit Twitter, then TikTok. Then the New York Times, in a barbershop in Montgomery County, Pennsylvania. An older man named Harold Sims was cutting hair when a customer asked, "You see all that Jasmine stuff?" Harold paused mid-fade. "She didn't say anything I haven't said right here 100 times. The only difference is, she said it in front of a camera." The room went quiet. Then someone mumbled, "Yeah. But she said it better." Wasn't hype. It was recognition. They weren't rallying because she shouted. They were rallying because she didn't. Because in a world flooded with noise, a calm, precise question hit harder than any slogan, and quietly, almost too quietly, Crockett's. Numbers began to rise. Independents, young voters, and immigrants. Even a sliver of moderate conservatives. They didn't all agree with her, but they respected her. No spin, no smear. It's just facts delivered with a spine. One Sunday, a newspaper in Toledo ran an op-ed titled, "The Question Heard Round the Country." The author, a 60-year-old pastor, wrote, "We can argue about tone, we can argue about timing. But what we can't argue with is the truth. The only reason that question shook so many people is because, deep down, they already knew the answer. Meanwhile, Jasmine kept moving. No victory laps, no hashtags, no sound bites. She spent the week quietly visiting schools, veteran centers, and sitting in on immigration hearings. No cameras, no press. She showed up. That was her statement, but behind the public swell of support, there were whispers. Big ones, because when Eli Kwan's documents finally began to circulate, carefully leaked to credible reporters, vetted by legal analysts, the conversation shifted again. Reporters started asking, if this paperwork is real, why has no one ever addressed it? Former Homeland Security officials refused to comment. The Trump team issued a vague denial, calling it misinformation. But the documents were clear. Dates didn't match. Declarations contradicted filings. It wasn't a smoking gun, but it was smoke. Real smoke. And where there's smoke, people start looking for fire. But before the blaze could spread, someone even closer to Melania and Trump stepped forward. And what she said flipped everything. She hadn't spoken publicly in over 5 years, not during the administration, not even to promote her book. Then, on a gray Thursday morning, Sonia Lavelle, Melania's former aide, announced on a podcast called The Politic Room, hosted by ex-journalist Brian Voss. No trailer, no warning. Just Sonia's voice, low, deliberate. I never thought I'd be doing this, but what happened to Jasmine Crockett this week made me feel like silence was complicity. And just like that, the national spotlight pivoted again. Sonia had worked with Melania for years. Travel prep, personal scheduling, press coordination. Not high profile, not famous, but she was there. She remembered everything. There were always questions, she said, about the visa timeline, the work history. I remember once in 2001, Melania got really nervous after a magazine asked about her modeling days before her green card came through. She said, I don't want people going through my papers. And I remember thinking, why would they? The host leaned in. Are you saying she admitted to being undocumented at some point? Sonia paused. I'm saying, the timeline never added up. And we all knew it didn't. No one wanted to be the one to say it out loud. That quote hit headlines within the hour. By the next day, it was everywhere. CNN, USA Today, local papers from Reno to Tallahassee, and Crockett. She didn't respond. She didn't have to. The story was speaking for itself now. Fact-checkers who'd once treaded carefully began publishing deeper dives. One from the Austin Ledger revealed that Melania's original H-1B visa had strict work restrictions likely violated based on the timeline of her modeling gigs. Back when she was First Lady, the White House dismissed those concerns as paperwork issues. But in this moment, that excuse didn't land, because the country was already rethinking what fairness meant. When Jasmine asked the question, they called her divisive. Now that the answers were surfacing, people weren't so sure. And then, something else started to shift. Quietly, talk radio hosts who had spent the week attacking her began to soften. I still think her delivery was confrontational, one said, but maybe there is a double standard worth discussing. Wasn't an apology, but it was movement. In Jacksonville, a retired immigration officer named Kendra Blaine posted a video to Facebook. She looked straight into the camera. I've processed over 8,000 cases in my career. If any of those people had Melania's discrepancies, they'd be denied or flagged. Let's stop pretending this is normal. Her video hit 2 million views in 2 days. From there, the floodgates opened. Crockett's inbox shifted. Less hate mail, more thank you notes, more stories, more questions. People who had stayed quiet for years finally felt like someone had cracked the door open. Still, Jasmine didn't gloat. At her next press conference, she stood in front of a plain backdrop that read, "Same rules, same country," and all she said was, "I didn't come here to play games. I came here to represent the people who never get the benefit of the doubt. This was never about Melania.
Oh.
It was about principle. If one group has to follow the rules, then everyone should. Period. It wasn't fiery. It wasn't long. But it landed. People clapped not because they were expected to, but because the truth had finally stepped into the light. And just as that moment began to settle, another was already breaking. An interview, one that would show exactly why Crockett's question mattered in the first place. The studio lights were sharp and unforgiving, but Jasmine Crockett wasn't rattled. She sat calmly across from Maya Redding, anchor of Truth Seat, the highest-rated political show of the year. This was Jasmine's first long-form interview since the firestorm began. No podium, no aides, no safety net. Just 2 chairs, hard questions, and millions watching. Maya went straight in. Congresswoman Crockett, you've become the center of a national conversation, one you didn't technically start. When you mentioned Melania and Trump's visa history, did you expect this kind of reaction? Jasmine blinked once, then smiled faintly. I expected discomfort. I didn't expect distortion. Maya leaned in. So let's go back. What exactly were you trying to say? Jasmine didn't pause to stall. She paused to be precise. What I said and what I meant was about consistency. We built a system in this country that constantly interrogates the legitimacy of certain people, their names, their accents, their birthplaces, and the people doing the interrogating rarely get interrogated themselves. She gestured gently with her hand. Melania and Trump is one example. She benefited from a process that others get penalized for. That's not an insult, that's not hate, that's reality. Maya nodded. But some say bringing up the former First Lady's immigration status was a personal attack. Jasmine didn't flinch. Then they weren't listening. I wasn't attacking her. I was questioning what her path represents, how some people are quietly given passes, while others are loudly prosecuted. She let the weight of her words settle. I've defended teenagers who got ice holds placed on them because of clerical errors. Meanwhile, we're told not to question inconsistencies tied to powerful figures. Why? Silence. Not awkward - earn, Maya shifted. You've also received a lot of support. Rallies, op-eds, even praise from moderate voters. What do you think resonated? Jasmine answered without hesitation. People saw someone ask a question they've been afraid to ask. They saw someone not flinch when the backlash hit. But more than that, they saw how fast the truth gets twisted when it touches power. Maya offered a half smile. And now there's talks, Senate run, maybe more? Any truth to that? Jasmine laughed softly, not dismissively, just honest. I didn't say what I said for ambition. I said it because I was tired of watching people swallow their truth to make others feel comfortable. Backstage, her senior advisor Lane watched from the green room, phone in hand, jaw clenched, not looking for mistakes, looking for impact. And she saw it. People weren't just watching Jasmine. They were connecting not to a headline, not to a soundbite, but to her. After the interview, social media lit up again. Only this time it wasn't chaos. It was reflection. Clips went viral. One line stuck. If we are truly one country under the law, then we shouldn't need reminders that some people's paperwork gets handled more gently than others' entire lives. That quote hit hard. It showed up on protest signs in Milwaukee, bumper stickers in Fresno, a hand-painted mural outside a youth center in Albuquerque. By week's end, it was printed on t-shirts. But Jasmine wasn't building a brand. She was forcing a conversation to long deferred. She left the studio quietly. No entourage. Just Lane and one staffer trailing behind. Outside, a woman in her 50s. Approached, nervous, but steady. My brother got deported 5 years ago, she said. One late form. That's all it took. He's still in Honduras, and you. You said what I wish I could have said to someone's face. Jasmine held her gaze and simply nodded. Sometimes words don't need repeating. Sometimes presence is enough. But even as the storm quieted behind her, Jasmine Crockett had one final statement to make, one that would bring everything full circle. She stood at a small podium in Baltimore, Maryland. Not a fundraiser, not a gala. A high school gym, Carver Vocational Technical. No teleprompter, no press wall, just folding chairs. Just students. There were teachers, A few reporters scribbling in notebooks. Jasmine Crockett scanned the room, a sea of young faces in sneakers and oversized hoodies. Braids, fades, purple-dyed curls. These weren't political insiders. They weren't pundits. They were the future, and some of them would be casting their first vote. In less than 2 years, so she spoke to them the way she always did. Direct, no fluff. No talking points. You're going to be told a lot about who you are, where you come from, what you deserve. Most of it won't come from facts. It'll come from fear. Fear from people who need to keep you small, because they're scared of what happens when you start asking real questions. She let it sit. Then, let me tell you something. Asking questions isn't un-American. It's the most American thing there is. A single clap came from the back row, then a ripple. Not a standing ovation, but enough to know they heard her. Enough to know they felt her, and that's all she ever really wanted. For nearly 2 weeks, the fallout from her remarks about Melania Trump had dominated headlines. But when the noise finally started to fade, what remained wasn't scandal. It was something far more threatening to the status quo. Curiosity. People started asking their own questions about green cards, about policy loopholes, about who gets grace and who gets grief when it comes to immigration. For some politicians, that shift was terrifying, because it meant the era of deflection was cracking. For Jasmine Crockett, it meant her job was just beginning. Reporters kept trying to bait her, draw her into another sparring match with Trump, but she wouldn't play the same game twice. He's loud, she said in one interview, but volume isn't the same as truth. Behind the scenes, she kept pushing. Her amendment on immigration transparency was gaining quiet traction, even bipartisan support. No one announced it publicly, but they were listening. Even aides from offices that once rolled their eyes at her name were now asking for copies of her notes. In Philadelphia, a grassroots group called Project Waypoint launched a campaign inspired by her viral moment. #SameStandard. Their mission demanded equal application of immigration law, regardless of wealth, fame, or political ties. Jasmine didn't claim credit, didn't tweet about it, but her team donated the maximum allowed. The woman who once defended kids in back rooms with flickering lights and one busted AC unit was now helping shape the next wave of legal reform. But more than that, she did something most lawmakers spend careers trying and failing to do. She told the truth, clearly, and she stood by it. Even when it burned, especially when it burned. As she left the school gym that afternoon, a student followed her out to the parking lot. 16, maybe 17. Hoodie pulled low. He didn't say much, just handed her a crumpled piece of notebook. Paper, a few lines, written in pen. I used to think I had to stay quiet. Thanks for showing me I don't. I just smiled, that quiet, steady kind of smile that says more than any speech could, because that was the point. Not proving anyone wrong, not trending, not applause. Truth, saying it when it mattered, showing others they can too. If this story made you pause, if it pushed you to think a little deeper about fairness, truth, or what real representation actually looks like, then don't just scroll past. Share it, talk about it, have the hard conversation, because silence won't protect you, but truth. Truth might just set something in motion.